Today is Friday, March 25th, 2022. My name is Miranda Christy. We're here at the Inn at Virginia Tech in Blacksburg, Virginia. I am sitting here with
Eva Jane Bunkley.
Terence Bunkley.
This project is part of an oral history project to record the stories of the fraction descendants, an enslaved family who lived and labored at the Solitude Plantation in Blacksburg. So thank you so much for coming here and sharing your stories with us. Do we have your permission to record this interview?
You do. And a little correction, we're McNorton. I'm a McNorton descendant.
Okay.
Yes.
Sorry about that.
No worries. I know there's a few families, but yes, the fractions and the McNortons, I believe, are represented here today.
Okay.
So this is this is monumental.
Excellent.
So yes, you have all of our permission.
Thank
Right?
you so much.
Yes.
All right, so tell me a little bit about yourselves and like where you grew up and, you know, your I guess your early family life.
Sure. Well, I grew up in Columbus, Ohio. I was born in Los Angeles, California. I guess Hollywood, to be precise. It was Cedars of Lebanon. It's not there anymore. It's a church now, I understand. And my mother had gone from Ohio briefly to LA, got pregnant with me, and then brought basically a newborn back to her family in Columbus, Ohio. And I was raised there until I moved to Atlanta, Georgia.
Mm-hmm.
Upon graduation, I went to the Ohio State University and moved to Atlanta and met this wonderful man right here who was a Southern man, native Atlantan for the most part, native Georgian. And we've been married. Now, we just celebrated 19 years last week.
Oh wow, congratulations.
Yeah.
How did you two meet?
We met actually through a friend of hers. We were at church in a lobby area and was introduced. And when I saw it for the first time, I really didn't pay any attention because it's just a mutual introduction.
Yeah, he was dating someone at the time. So it was just, oh, this is Terrence, this is Eva. Oh, hey, just kind of in passing. But yeah, we met at a church we used to attend.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So tell me a little bit about what you do now and what your life is like. I know you said you're from Atlanta coming in.
Yes. So I moved there because I wanted to pursue a career in something artistic. I was a fashion major,
Mm-hmm.
and I ended up being a makeup artist. So since 1993, since graduation, I have worked as a professional makeup artist in the Atlanta area. And that has been, it's been a beautiful career for me. I'm going into my 29th year of doing that. I won Emmy Awards in 2001 and 2002. I was primarily in television, even more so like niche news. I did like morning anchors on our NBC and FOX affiliates for many years. And a few years after that, when my first son was born in 2004, I started a career as a producer. So I'm an indie filmmaker as well. So my production company, Evalution Studios, I produce content, that type of thing. And then more recently, just to an artist. It's like I'm all over the place with my artists. Like I patented a makeup tool called the Makeup Bullet, high-def cosmetic finger sponge. It's a sponge that you put on your finger and you can apply your makeup just with the stroke of a finger. So just a creative and entrepreneur. So that's what I do.
Oh, what do I do?
What do you do?
Not much as she does. No,
He keeps me grounded.
Yeah, let's keep balance there. I work in kind of like the construction area, fireplaces. I've been doing it close to 30 years now. So anything with a fireplace, new construction, remodels, custom homes, gas logs, doors, chimney pans, anything dealing with fireplaces,
Anything.
fire pits, gas line runs, and different things of that nature. So I have my own business doing that.
If fire comes out of it, he is a genius. He is the fireplace genius. Like literally. That is his moniker.
Sounds like you've both had impressive careers then. So what is your relationship with the greater Smithfield area and Blacksburg and just this region?
I know. You know, I really did not fully understand it. I, like many, built my family tree on the internet some years back and saw some names that didn't, you know, ring any bells, didn't set off any alarms. I'm like, oh, okay, everybody's made from two people and those two people have different names.
Mm-hmm.
The name that I was most familiar with growing up was my family name as far as my mother's maiden name, which was Smith. So my grandfather was a Smith, his father and his father. And then going up, I started to see like, oh, it branches off to where John Smith, his grandfather, was married to Charlotte Smith, who was Burks, and she was the daughter of Eliza Burks, who married Reuben Burks, but Eliza was Eliza McNorton Burks. So Eliza was, I believe, the fourth child in the matriarch and patriarch of the McNorton family, which was enslaved at Smithfield Plantation. And I just found this out maybe a month ago.
What was that like for you?
I am very fresh to this understanding and enlightenment of, you know, maybe even where the Smith name came from, because I just, you know, didn't know, but I saw that my grandfather's grandfather, John Smith, was also enslaved at Smithfield. So between him and his wife, they were both being held there to labor and live and toil. So to see people with names that were acknowledged on a plaque that's still at the museum, I guess at Solitude or maybe the Smithfield House, I'm not sure which, but as I was researching and finding out online, there were many times that my eyes kind of welled up, you know, and I tapped Terrence and I'm like, oh my God, like I'm related to this person and this person and this person and this person. These are all my ancestors. That it was kind of bittersweet. I mean, bitter in, of course, slavery, you know, to know that we were abducted and came over here and put in such a horrific situation, but glad that I could at least, you know, be able to trace that, because so many African Americans are not able to trace exactly where, when you don't know, you know, some of the enslaved didn't have last names. So you just kind of guessing at, well, I know, you know, my great-greats were from this area. I'd seen Christiansburg and Blacksburg and Montgomery County on birth certificates and things, but I just had no reference point, no point of, this is my first time ever visiting this area. So to think like, oh, my grandfather and my great-grandfather, my great-grandmother and my, you know, all of my ancestors walked around here, you know, it gave me a sense of belonging more so, but pride in their resilience, you know? Mm-hmm. That's a lot to suffer through and to rise from, and then to go on to build lives, because as far as I knew, I mean, you feel like, okay, you're black in America, you probably, most of us came over from that's our story. However, the more recent story that I knew is my grandfather was a doctor. He was a podiatrist. We had, his sister was a school principal and educator, first cousin. We have 5 Evas. So I'm an Eva Jane. We had 3 Eva Janes of the Smiths. So what I knew was there was a bunch of doctors. Even his uncle was a doctor. His first cousin was a doctor. So lots of medicine, lots of educators, lots of firsts. His first cousin, Eva Jane Smith, who I share a name with, she was one of the charter members of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated on Theta chapter on Ohio State's campus back in 1921. So that's the history that I knew. I was not able to go back farther to say, oh my goodness, that's what Christiansburg and Blacksburg, that's why, you know, they were born here. That's why they started here. But then they migrated to Philadelphia. So my grandfather, as far as I knew, was from Philadelphia. That's what I knew. And that's where he went to school and all. Yeah.
Okay. That's a whole lot to discover about your family.
Yeah, and then I said, I have to be here. I have to be a part of this. Like my sons, we have 2 sons that are 16 and 18 right now. And I'm like, they're getting a jump start on understanding a part of our history that I wasn't able to. And it wasn't that, I'm sure my grandfather would have shared it with me, but he passed when I was 5 years old. And then my mother passed like less than a year later. So it was me and my grandmother, and she was an in-law. So she knew some about the Smiths and possibly the McNortons, but she was, she married into the family. So pictures and photos were passed down to me, but not that oral history.
Right. What has that been like, sharing that with your sons as you discover it?
What do you think? How do you think they're taking it?
Yeah, I think for them it's a new exposure, especially when you talk about something that happened in the 1800s, let alone 2000. So for them, it's almost like, that's before my time, so I don't, but understanding the importance of that and what it is bringing to them and enlightening them, into now. So I think it's a seesaw, emotion. Yeah, okay, then whatever, at times. But for the most part, I think they're really looking at the value of it.
Yeah.
And then what it brings to them. So it's interesting.
I believe they have an appreciation for it. Sometimes I'll have to kind of snap them out and show them the significance of something. We went to view the Christiansburg Institute, the museum there, and some of the building that's still standing, the structure, and walked through that and got to show them a little bit of that. And we just came from the cemetery, and my older son was like, "Oh, look over here, some more Smiths. Oh, here's a McNorton." So I think as we expose them to it, then they'll kind of just develop an appreciation. And as they get older, they're teenagers, they've got other stuff in their heads and minds. But I think it's just very important to give them a head start on what I didn't know, so that they can pass it down to their children, and see the value and importance of that as well.
What do you think the impact has been for you as far as not knowing this until later in your life when you get into this research?
I say God is just full of surprises, because I just had my 50th birthday. And to find this out at this point, I did kind of a early family research about 18 years ago that I put into a film. It's called My Mother Was a Butterfly. And it toured around. I even came to a college here in Virginia twice. They invited me to screen it. And it was more so about that early history of just trying to figure out who my mother was. Because that story was kept from me because it was so painful for my grandmother. So just imagine a whole generation of people who were enslaved and happy to be able to move on. Not happy to, but just like out of necessity. Okay, let's put this behind us. Sometimes that history was not passed down because it was so painful. And I saw that in my grandmother. I saw that every time I would ask her just about my mother, her daughter, her only child, she would get so worked up and so anxious about she didn't want me to, she thought the knowledge of it might have me repeat some of the mistakes that my mother made. So she was like, if you know nothing, then I'm starting with a fresh, clean slate, She didn't introduce me to any of my mother's friends. She kept all them away. She's just like, no, this is, if I just kind of hide this, if I put it behind me, put the past behind, then it won't repeat itself in the future. However, I think it's important that we share the mistakes of the past, the triumphs of the past, the lessons that we've learned personally, because we're all just doing the best we can, trying to get it right for the most part. There's some ugly parts of our past. I don't believe in, just covering it up because, we could just move on because it makes some people feel badly and we don't want to hurt anyone. It's like, we don't want to repeat that though. So to be able to give context and not just share this is what happened, but share it from a point of compassion and empathy and learning and progression, and this is what we learned from that. This is the detriment that it serves to society. This is how we, and then potentially come together to say, how do we do better and fix it and move forward together in a way that we can fulfill for everyone who's a part of the United States to be able to have life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, and everybody share in that American dream. And I think that can only come from passing that down and teaching our children to be better than the previous generation.
Yeah, I think that, I'm sorry that that was so painful for your family, that you had to learn that later on.
Yeah, but I mean, it took me, until I was 32 to go digging?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, 34, 33. Yeah, something like that to go digging. I don't necessarily want them to have to start from ground zero then. So you expose them, and then, as they get older, they'll understand the value once they have their own children, passing that along, if you make it important at the start,
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
So what has it been like for you coming back here as a family and meeting everyone and going around the area, and what has that meant to you as you do that together?
It's interesting because it is sort of a homecoming, but it's painful sometimes to kind of acknowledge it as that, just because of the home that they built from the little that they had and the little that they were afforded and allowed, not from what they chose. Something was chosen for them, but I'm the benefactor of, and our children are the benefactor of the choices that they made after emancipation. Then they get to choose, okay, this is where I'm going to try to start at. And even that choice was still had guardrails on it. There were a lot of opportunities that they weren't allowed, but for the places that they said, oh, there's these places that we can go. We can go to Pennsylvania, we can go to Ohio, we can go north, and we can try to make a better life for ourselves and our children. So, I think life is full of pleasure and pain, and you have to take them both together. And I'm very thankful for my life. I'm very thankful I had a good life till I figured all this out. So I'm going to have a good life after, and I think it's even going to be further enriched by this knowledge. And then where do we go from here?
Mm-hmm.
Where do we go from here?
So one thing that we were curious about was what message you would give to descendants of other enslaved families or other people who are hearing this story and engaging with it, what you would want them to know or take from this and what it means to you.
What do you think?
Well, one, the information, that's available. At times for, now, what we're experiencing, information that's available. It is not the easiest to listen to, because you're trying to understand the difficulties and the triumphs and how things, for the most part, gets twisted. And so the misunderstandings, and then you try to take all of that and say, the good that we can take from it and give our generation now the opportunity to grow and develop without all of the obstacles and the hurdles, and when you want to hide truths. And so when you can bring all of that to the forefront, the dignity and the pride that our kids can operate in and others can operate in, and is just having a peace. There's not much that one can do about how things went back then, but there's a lot that you can do about how things move going forward and how things, happen. So I think it's just levels of respect that need to be, levels of gratitude and appreciation for the differences that are there, because there's positive in all of it. And once you can do that, then I think when you come into situations like this, that it's a first experience, just month fresh. However, I'm not being looked at side-eyed or sideways because of all of what the past has in it, but just looking at who I am as a person who bringing positivity back to society. And so it gives us the opportunity to take our children and take times like this and say, you know what, yeah, that was the end. However, what we've learned to respect from it and grow and develop, so that moving forward, we're all treated equal. And it's not easy, but that's kind of like what I look at from this is, moving forward, how the positivity that can come from it, because there's great contributions from them. Great ideas and entrepreneurship and the value of a person's mind of creativity that one could look at and respect and say that person has contributions to society, and you can respect that.
Definitely. So I know that you had talked about being raised by your grandmother. Would you be willing to talk a little bit about what that was like, or any memories you may have or traditions you had that you remember?
Sure. So my grandmother, my maternal grandmother, her name was Georgia Walker Smith. Georgia B. She grew up Georgia B. She was a Walker. She was raised in Kentucky. And she met my grandfather, I understand. She was working as a domestic, and he was in college or maybe podiatry school. It was called Sharabity back then. I found when I had his diploma, I'm like, what is this word? Things change branding. But she was a very strong woman. My grandfather was born in 1902. She was born in 1907. And when my grandfather passed back in 1976, she was 70 years old. Well, she was 70 when my mother passed that following year, and I was 6 years old. So at 70, she's long since retired. She had her own beauty, she was a beautician, she had her own business. She had a salon in the basement of their home. She did everyone's hair. All of the who's who of high society, they were kind of plugged into that. So her main focus was me at that point, She said when my mom passed that a nice family that's very, very close to ours wanted to adopt me because they're like, oh, you're in retirement, you live in this retirement community, in this high rise, And she was like, no, I'm going to raise Eva Jane. And she lived to be 94. And she lived alone until she was 92. So, Georgia Walker Smith, she was an amazing woman. She was very short stature, kind of thick. She came from a big family of, I believe, 10 children. And she was very nurturing. She loved to cook, she loved to serve, she loved to set beautiful tables with beautiful lace tablecloths and her china and her silver, and she loved to entertain people and feed them, and she was the life of the party. And she was very determined that I was going to succeed. She was like, value of education. She's like, you have to go to college, and we lived in Columbus, Ohio, as I said, and yeah, I owe my Grammy everything. The last 2 years of her life, I moved her to Atlanta. She was in a nursing facility there. She started to develop a bit of dementia. So that was I used to, not know how I was gonna handle her passing, because it was just me and her. That was it. And I was like, I was working on a client when I worked at the salon in Atlanta, and I'm doing her makeup, and I was like, oh my gosh, if anything ever happens to my grandmother. And she said, when, Eva? My grandmother by then was in her upper 80s. She said, no, it's when. And I'm like, I can't think about that. I can't think about that. Like, I don't know what I do. And I looked at the grace that God gave me, because he took her very slowly, in that her mind started to go a little bit, I remember the first time I came back to see her. I came back to see her after a while, and she said, she was telling me all about Eva. And Eva graduated with honors from Ohio State, and Eva this, and she lives in Atlanta, and she's working. And I looked at her, and I said, Grammy, who am I? And she said, oh, you're Eva. She said, ooh, that was strange. So then more little episodes like that started to happen, and I said, okay, and then she started leaving stuff on the stove, and pots, and she lived in buildings, so they're like, fire department's coming out, like, you're gonna have to do something about Miss Smith, she's getting kind of, I was like, okay. So I moved her down here, and shortly after that, I met Terrence, and he got to meet my grandmother, he got to go visit with me, I have pictures of them, and it was just like it's like a baton being handed off, And there's a scripture that talks about how the Lord gives, God gives the solitary to families. So I thought, oh, okay, because he's from a big family. That's the family. So I got him and his family. His mother's alive, his father's alive. And then a few years later, when I made my film, in the midst of making it, I met my father for the first time. It's in the film and everything. I met Roosevelt Beale. I'd never known his name. And then he has a huge family, lots of brothers and sisters, and I got uncles and aunts, and they're in Alabama, and they're from St. John, the Virgin Islands, and they love me, and they're the most wonderful people. And then fast forward to this year, I just do a little DNA test and find a whole swath of, oh, you're related to these 1,500 people, and the McNortons, and all of these beautiful people. I'm like, I was solitary. It was just me and my Grammy. That's all I knew. And when she passed, I was like, wow. And I got him, I got my father's family, and now I have my mother's family. And it's been mind-blowing. It's been the best gift, the people, the stories, the rich heritage, the good, the bad, the ugly, all of it. I'm just so thankful. And I'm like, wow, Lord, you always are surprising me with something, and let me know that I'm not alone. And we're coming to here, and there's people here that are interested in our stories, to hear about us and hear about what we've gone through and what we've become and where we are, the families that we're building, the lives that we're building, all over the U.S. I'm very thankful, so thank you for even Karen and sitting here with us.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing with us and being open to share your story and be vulnerable with that. Mm-hmm. It sounds like this connection has been very important to you. So I'm curious, do you plan to engage more with those connections you found moving forward, or what do you envision for the?
Well, meeting Dr. Kira Mosley Hobbs and the More Than a Fraction Foundation, and her starting her journey of finding the fractions, and then just tracing her heritage, and then then McNortons start popping up and cropping up, and it's like, there's still not a lot of the McNortons that have been found. I know that my little small piece that I know in Cleveland and Philly and Pittsburgh, throughout that area. So I'm like, there's a whole lot more siblings in that line. I would love to, bring us together, bring more together. Between the Saunders, there's a whole another family, there's the Moons, so I mean, of course, since we were all in that Smithfield community, there was intermarriage, there's probably, cousins and everything. I mean, we're all connected.
Mm-hmm.
So just to be able to stay connected to this swath of people and find more, because just imagine I was 50 and I had no clue. There's a whole lot of other people out there that probably just have no clue of any of this. So I think enlightenment is beautiful, and the more people that I can share this with and find and bring them into the fold, I'm happy to do it.
Is there anything else that you think that maybe I haven't touched on, or anything else that you would want people to know or that you'd like to share about yourself or your family?
I mean, this person sitting to my right, every family, every person is made of two people. So this was my partner in saying I always had a dream about the type of children that I wanted to raise, the type of mother I wanted to be. And so my prayer is that, together with the wisdom that he has and the big, huge heart that he has, when I met him, he was a single father raising 3 children, 2 of which he adopted. So the heart on this man is enormous. And he's a nurturer, he's the oldest of 7, and I was an only, so he has lots of patience and tolerance, And you see, he's like, oh, what do you ask me? What do? I do this and this and this and this, and he's like, I do this. And so this is like, we're like the perfect counterbalance for one another. So moving forward, when our children's children are learning about their heritage, they'll be learning about us. Because, it takes 2. So when I look back at my family tree, we've got, the Smiths. Those are the ones I knew, the Smiths. And then moving on up, we've got the Burks, and then the McNortons. So trying to explore that. And then I did ancestry on my father's side. We just did ancestry on his side. So just discovering all that we can together is going to enrich the lives of our children and them even more, so we can pass that knowledge, down. And I think that's important. I was, I've talked to, it's interesting, some people get caught up on one family name, just one. They'll be like, this one, oh yeah, I'm a such and such. And I'm like, well, you're more than just a that. You're a that and a that. And they were a that and a that. So the more you keep going on, but we can only go up so far as African American families. So the top that I've gotten to is McNorton. And McNorton started out on Smithfield and Smith. And I guess I know where Smith came from as the last name. But it's been fascinating. Baby, do you have any last words? You just finish us out. Take us home.
No, I think it's important. My mom would say to us, this is your cousin, and this is your aunt, and this is, and you would go, Mom, I don't want to listen to, hey, we met this people, and you remember this face? And nah. And then when you look back on it, like I do now, with what has happened to her, it creates a thirst. Because that part of history can make you so much better just by understanding once you've been enlightened to it, because there's so much in it for you to take, and as an individual, continue to strive to be a better person, stronger person, someone who's inquisitive, that says, productivity comes out of my being inquisitive. And then you're adding to society. So I think from it, we have to, when research about history like this is done, we have to look at how it can be a productive thing. But it has to be done with the integrity that, you know, what you find on the rock is what's underneath that rock. There's no way to go, well, that's not what I found. No, when you turn the rock over, that's what's there. And so you have to take that and say, what's in it that for now helps us to grow, develop into a better, you know, race of people.
Human race.
You know, and if we can do that, then, you know, it just only gets better moving forward from here. And that's all you can do with it. You know, just respect that part and then say, hey, moving forward, out of what we've found, let's take all of this and make the good happen from it. And then that's what you do. So, you know, exposing our children to that is what my game plan is, and it will continue to be, so that they can operate in wisdom moving forward and just be wise about decision making.
Yeah.
For sure. Thank you so much, both of you, for sharing your story with us and talking to me, taking your time. I hope you have an excellent weekend here, get to mingle with plenty of people, and
Definitely.
yeah, thanks so much.
Thank you, sweetheart. All right, look at us.
You did great.
Thanks. I always feel a little nervous going in, but